let's try this again. Hopefully I'm dropping less frames than I was just a second ago. Just gonna watch the meters here for just a second before we kick anything off. I am not usually in this time slot. This time slot is usually locked down by our own Greg Bogus, but I am not Greg. I am Brent Schooley. I'm a developer evangelist with Twilio, and I am coming to you from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I was going to do something completely different from what I've been doing lately on Twitch, and we were going to roll into some learning Ruby on Code School, and I was going to try something completely different. But I figured that since I'm operating out of a different time slot today, I'd probably want to stick to what I've been doing, which is some intro to iOS programming and taking a look at some Hello World. So the thing that we'll start off with in about 14 minutes, we'll kick things off for real at 3:30 Eastern. So that'll be 12:30, just after lunch, out on the West Coast. Some say the best coast. There's a lot that would disagree with that, but hey, we're all friends here. I would love to know in the chat where you are from, if you are tuning in right now, what programming languages you work with most frequently, and most importantly, what you're looking to get out of this stream today. I'm going to toggle the scene just for a moment over to something without my screen so that I can do some social networking before we get started over on my Mac, which is where most of today's presentation is going to originate from. So I am going to kick off some tweets so that people know to come join us right now. So just a few minutes while I prep some things. Let's just add a text label, let people know what's going on. Getting set up. That font size is way too big for this, huh? We don't need that at all. There we go. That looks pretty good. Just so when people drop in and they see me furiously typing away somewhere else and they don't really see anything going on, they'll know things are just getting set up. I want to make sure people know where they can go to tune in right now. People might not know that this is going on, so I want to make sure that people know to tune in. I'm going to kick off a recording locally so that we have some files to take a look at later. I am going to queue up a tweet. Copy that. And we'll compose a tweet from @Twilio that says that you can join me right now. We got one current viewer. Hello current viewers. Hello everyone that has tuned in right now. I am getting set up at the moment, and we will get rolling into some iOS programming right quick once I have everything set up and rolling. Just want to send out a tweet to let everyone know that they should join in. Join in the fun. And I will retweet that over yonder, and then we will move back into Xcode. How much of the book have you read? Which book, sir? Or ma'am? Ban lemons. Oh, specifically a book called Building iOS Apps with Swift. Is that what you're talking about? I have not read that book. I am a current iOS developer. And what we'll be doing today is actually just playing around with some code, and I think I'm going to the Swift book on iBooks. Oh, I have read most of that, pieces and parts of that from time to time. I believe I read through completely through one of the earlier versions, but I haven't read all of the sort of latest up to date Swift. What is it? 2.1. There's a 2.2 version in the latest betas, but right now I have not gone back and read through some of the new stuff. That's a good book, though. I'm happy that when they came out with their language, they put something into iBooks for it. So I'm going to get started. Let's just dive right in. I'm going to do a relatively quick hello world, I'd say, just to kind of walk through what it looks like. Thank you for the follow, sir. Just to walk through a relatively quick single view application that shows you how basic applications work. Nothing too crazy. We'll just take a look at how Swift looks for an iOS application, how to create just a very simple button and label on screen, and we'll set that up to say hello world when we click on it. So the way we're going to operate on this, I need to throw something in here. Okay, that's what I was wondering, why I didn't get my sound alerting me that you had followed. Now we have that working. That's cool. So what we are going to do is create a new iOS application. Now we got a bunch of templates we could choose from, and I'm going to describe what these are. So we have master detail. We have master detail is building, say, a list of things that you can tap on one to move to more details about it. There's page-based applications, if you're familiar with the old school weather application that you could page through. That's kind of an antiquated app idea, I think. The single view application is what we're going to start with, which is just, as it describes, a single page application. You really start there when you don't need a lot of the structure that Xcode provides for you. You just want to kind of build from scratch. It's only going to give you a single view. That makes it easy. Tabbed application. You've probably seen iOS applications with a tab bar at the bottom. That's what this application template is for. And then there's game. So Apple has two game frameworks. There's SpriteKit for building 2D games, and there's SceneKit for building 3D games. This is the game template that you would use for either of those two platforms. But we're going to use this single view application template. We might have more than a single view, but it's a good starting point to roll with. And just here you can give your application a name. Obviously, we're going to just call this Hello Twitch Creative. And our organization name here is Twilio. If I haven't introduced myself properly, I am Brent Schooley. I'm a developer evangelist at a company called Twilio. We are a developer platform that makes it super easy for you to connect the people that you care about to each other and to your application. We do it with things like text messaging and voice calling, as well as, super exciting, recently we've come out with some iOS SDKs for chat applications and video chat applications. So we might take a look at that a little bit later after we've done some basic introductory iOS programming. Maybe we'll go out and grab the video application and see how we might create a video application, or we could do chat. Maybe we'll do a choose your own adventure on that later. But we're just creating a basic Hello World right now, Hello Twitch Creative, and we'll create that using Swift, save it wherever we want to, and then we're dropped into the project. The first place that we want to look, where we want to get started, is probably in the UI, but let's just take a tour around what files we get by default. I think I'm going to bump these fonts up just a little bit. Grab all these, and we'll set these to, like, I think 24 is probably going to be sufficient. Let me know if that's too small. It seems to look pretty good here, but if that's too small, let me know. So we'll go with that for now. This is the app delegate. This application, this is the class that represents your application. You'll find things like the application lifecycle here. This is where your application launched. If you need to run some code when the application launches, that goes here. If you need to do things when the application is going into the background or when it's going inactive, you would do those here. If you're getting low on memory, if your application came back from background, all of these are things that you would find hooks for in your app delegate. We're not going to do anything with the app delegate in this application because we really don't need to. The next file that's over here in the project navigator is viewcontroller.swift, and this is the code file for the single view that we have in our single view application. So we're going to take a look at the UI building in a second, but suffice it to say, this right here is the code that goes behind that user interface that we'll build. So here we will have access to all of the things that we put into our UI, and this is where we'll run business logic for our single view. Where this lives in UI form is inside of main.storyboard. So you'll see that there is this single view controller in the middle of the screen. If we click on it and we take a look over here in this inspector panel, the inspector over here on the left is the file inspector. That gives you some info about the storyboard file itself. If we click here though, on this one, we'll see the custom class that is assigned to this view controller. So this view controller maps to a class called view controller. We just looked at that class. It's in viewcontroller.swift. So what this is saying, what this line right here is saying, is that the view controller we have selected over in the UI builder maps to viewcontroller.swift's class. So that basically means that we will be able to create our UI objects on this part of the screen, and we'll be able to map it over to the view controller class inside of viewcontroller.swift. The way we add things to our view here is over in this library panel down at the bottom. This has a bunch of different controls that we can add, and there's a search button down at the bottom that will allow us to filter. So in there I'm going to type label. So a label, as this says here, is for variably sized amount of static text. It's a single line of text, and we'll grab that and drag it out and place it in the center. Let's see if we can zoom up a little bit. And we can resize this. Now, this won't matter too much because we're really going to change how this works in a minute with something called auto layout. The way you position views within iOS is with something called auto layout. And we'll use that in a second, but first we want to create a label. Then we will create a button that we can click to change that label to say hello Twitch, hello Twitch Creative. You'll notice when I drag around that there's some indicators that that appear. Actually, and I'm option dragging currently, so it's making a duplicate. But you'll notice these lines that appear. These are based on the Apple interface guidelines. They show you sort of margins that make sense based on those rules. Just something to keep in mind when you're moving things around. Delete that extra button. And one thing we could do is we could center up this text. So again, using the inspectors, we can come to this one, which is the attributes inspector. We'll click on that, and there's a text alignment one right here that will center up our label. Cool. So we have the label that we want, and we have the button that we can change. So if we double click on the button, it was just a simple double click, we can change the text of this button to say hello. And when we click that button, we'll change the text of the label to hello Twitch. And that's the basics. One other thing that's in here that's helpful later on is this scene representation. So this panel right here shows us everything that's available in this scene. So a scene is a collection of view controllers that map to a specific portion of your application. Once upon a time when we only had iPhones, a scene didn't exist. A view controller represented a single screen. Now we have things. The iPad introduced things like popover controllers that might be part of a screen in conjunction with another view controller. So those two things would get packaged under a scene. So you can think of these as a certain screen of your application is a scene. In our case, it's a single view controller. We have a few things here that we'll worry about in a second, which is the top and bottom layout guide. Those are for positioning. And then this is our view, and as I click on the view, you'll notice that it gets highlighted over in the view controller on the right. And then we have two components. We have our label and our say hello button that we created before, and then three other things that we in this application don't really care about too much, but there are other objects that we can create events off of. First responder has to do with the keyboard, what receives input first in the application, and exit is the exit segue. So when the screen leaves, we can hook up some code to that. The storyboard entry point is what view controller launches when the application starts, or when this storyboard is loaded, actually. So that's cool. We have a label and we have a button, but we can't really do anything with these because we don't have any code for them. So we can get at that pretty easily. I'm going to hide this view controller scene and switch to what is called the assistant editor. And what the assistant editor tries to do is it tries to be smart about showing a file on the right that matches what is being shown on the left. And in our case, that's pretty obvious what it should show. When it is set to automatic mode up here, so this right here, we can change to different modes. There's a bunch of different things. You can switch this so that you have a traditional split view and you can show whatever you want there. In automatic mode, it's going to try to figure out what the smartest file to show over here on the right is. Since this is a view controller since this class is representing a view controller, it gets loaded in the assistant editor automatically. So I mentioned before that this view controller class inside of viewcontroller.swift matched this view controller. That's why that's open in the assistant editor. And what we can do with that now is we can create a reference from the view to the view controller class. And the way we do that is hold down your control key, and you do the weirdest gesture possibly in the history of programming. I might be wrong about that, but this is pretty obscure. You hold down control and you drag from the control to the code. And up in this top section where we want to stick our variables, that's where we'll drop. And when we drop, we're presented with a popover that says, what do you want to create? Do you want to create an outlet or an outlet collection? I want to create an outlet. Now, an outlet you can just think of as a reference. It's a reference in code to the UI control back in the view. So if I create an outlet for our button, or for our label, I'll have access to the label from the view controller code. So that's what we want to do. And this is our hello label. And we'll create that outlet by clicking connect. And you'll notice we now have a line in our code for that label. So that gives me access, like I said, to that label anywhere from our code. And where we're going to want to access it directly is in the buttons action. So when we tap this button, we want to change the label text from label to Hello Twitch Creative. To do that, we do the control drag thing again. So I hold down control and I drag over to the code. This time I'm going to drop it down where the methods are, where the functions are inside of my class, and I'll let go. And I'm going to change the drop down this time from outlet to action, because what I want to have happen is I want some code to run when I tap on the button. Now, creating an action gives me a function inside of my view controller class to do just that. And we'll just call this say hello. Notice here the event, touch up inside. Just as a quick UX aside, touch up inside means that the user has pressed down on the button and they have released while still inside of the button. Contrast that with the user has pressed down inside of the button, moved their finger outside of the button, and released, i.e. they want to cancel. They don't actually want to run the event. That's the difference here between touch up inside and touch down inside or touch up somewhere else, right? This is the method that will fire when they've actually tapped on the button. So that's what we want to hook up. So we'll do that. Now we have a say hello function. And that's all we really wanted, because now we can say hello label.text is equal to hello Twitch creative. And that's that. That's the basics for our application right now. Now there's one caveat. Over here, things look great. We've got a centered label and we've got a centered button. Any wagers on whether the application will actually look like that when we run it? I am going to bet that it won't, because we have not actually specified using auto layout where that label and button should be. So we'll get some weird results. It won't be exactly what we expect. In fact, it's pretty bad. We have a label chucked way off the right side of the application, and we have the button also way off to the right side. If we rotate, things look fine. So that should indicate that it works fine in some configurations, but it's not in others. And the reason for that is, if we head back to our view controller and just take a look at what's going on here down in this inspector, this says that we are operating in any width, any height. So this is a very generic, any is a very generic layout that says, give me some loose rules for how to specify this this UI given a device of arbitrary size. And that's fine, but the problem is we haven't really concretely told Xcode where we want these to exist. And the way we do that, again, coming back to our control drag gesture, if I am to drag up to the top line, I'll get a little pop-up that has some options for me. And what I want to do is specify a constraint that says that I want this button to maintain its vertical spacing to the top. Now immediately, things have gone red, and I should probably figure out why they've gone red before I move forward with anything. So I've specified that I want the label to be a certain distance from the top of the screen, but I haven't told it where it should position itself in the X direction. So once again, our application doesn't know where to position this label. It knows where to keep it from the top, so that's what this blue line is indicating, that this label should maintain this distance from the top of the application. This red box says, I don't know what to do with this thing. And we can fix that by control dragging, again, towards the center of the application, and then I'm going to select center horizontally in container. That's going to tell our application to keep the same distance from the top of the screen, but also center it within its container. And you'll notice now we have some orange boxes. So the orange solid box says this is how big you've drawn this thing in the interface builder. So you've drawn a big box, but the constraints that you've applied are telling me that it should actually only be this dotted box on the inside. So we need to resolve that for the view to look correct in Xcode. So the way we do that is we come down here. There's this little triangle version of what looks like a 2D Star Wars ship. I'm not gonna give any trademark names, but these guys look like they could be out of the Star Wars universe, I suppose. This is the one that we want for resolving auto layout. And what we'll do is we'll just say update the frames for the selected view, and that's exactly what happens. So the label, the boxes indicating the size of the label, fix themselves so that they are directly representing what we have assigned the size for our label. We need to do the same thing with the button. So what we want to do with the button is we want it to maintain spacing from the label. So we'll control drag from the button to the label and say maintain vertical spacing. And then we'll also control drag to the center and say center horizontally in container like we did with the label. And with that in place, we should be good to go. Rather than run the application, I figured I'd show you one more feature of the Assistant Editor. If we go into Assistant Editor, and this time, instead of using it in automatic mode, for storyboards, there's a mode called Preview. And we can go down to Preview and pick our storyboard. And what we get instead over on the right hand side is a specific device's representation of the view that we're looking at currently. And we can do things like rotate it. So I can rotate that to see what it would look like in landscape. I can come down here and click this plus and add a different device. So I can add an iPhone 6 Plus size interface and make sure that things look fine on a 6 Plus. So that's a pretty versatile assistant editor. It allows you to do a lot of things in terms of seeing how your application would look without having to run it. Who do we have? Or do we have anybody in the chat? If there's anybody in the chat, don't stay quiet. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know where you're from. And if you're a software developer, let me know what your favorite language is, or if you're looking to learn iOS development, or just kind of why you're here. But I'd love to know where you're from. So let me know, city and state or country, wherever you're from. Let's keep this interactive. In fact, we also have a friend in the chat called Nightbot who will let us know what happens. We may or may not do IP messaging. We might do video today, just for kicks. But yeah, let me know. Participate in the chat so that we can keep this interactive. That's the basics for Hello World. We should probably take a look and see to make sure everything is working correctly. So everything's positioned the way we expected it to be. When we rotate, it maintains that position, and that's great. If we click the button, it now says Hello Twitch Creative, which is what we expected. So it would seem to me that everything is working correctly, which is awesome. That's always good. It's always a good start. So, all right, what should we do next? Well, I figure a logical next step from here, since we've taken a look at basic labels, basic buttons, basic programming, I suppose we should just take a look and see what kind of things you can set inside of the inspector. So if I go to the Say Hello button, we can do some things like maybe you wanted the text color for the button to be different. You have a full slider over here for that. So we can switch that button to orange. That would be something that you might want to do at the project level. There's all kinds of appearance manager type things that you can do to tweak that sort of stuff. But that's one way that this can work. Does anybody have any questions at this point? If not, I'm going to move on to table views. And we'll take a look at how we can do things inside of a UI table view. So the way that works, we'll do a new project, and we will do let's do a master detail application and take a look at what might get populated for a master detail Twitch demo. All right. So what is going to happen with this guy is we're going to end up with some more files to work with. We have a master view controller and a detail view controller. We'll take a look at those in a moment, but let's look at the storyboard and see what's going on in here first. So if we go all the way over to where the arrow is, this is what is going to start up the application. And what is going to happen is a split view controller is going to run, and it's going to give us a few options. And the reason why it's a split view controller is that on the iPhone 6 Plus and on the iPad, these sort of master detail views, when you go into landscape, you can show the list on the left and the master on the left and the detail on the right. Traditional iPhone application, it just operates as list, and then you tap on something and you navigate over to the detail. So let's take a look at, we can run this on a 6 Plus. Let's take a look at what the application looks like before we get started with it. And then we'll play around with the table view cell and see what kind of different things we can create. So this is running on a 6 Plus simulator, and when it finishes launching, we will need to change the scale. It is too big for our screen. All right, so we zoom out a bit on the 6 Plus, and the way the application is architected, we can tap on this plus, and it adds a new entry into the table, with the timestamp, and we click the timestamp, and it shows the timestamp in the center. So what this is basically, this application is showing is how to create a table view, and how to pass data when the table view cell is clicked. Basic stuff, rudimentary almost, but it shows off some things that are tricky to get right. So when you tap on a cell, how do I pass that data that I want to show on the next screen as that transition is happening? We'll take a look at how that works in a second. But I mentioned that this was a split view, and that there is a reason for it being a split view, and that is that we can have the master on the left and the detail on the right on a larger screen. So on a 6 Plus or an iPad, this is a configuration that is supported. So we need a split view to make that happen, because we might be showing the master and the detail at the same time, or we might not be, depending on screen size. So if we were to run this instead on, on a 5, or if we were to take a look at this in the assistant view, if we were to pull this up in preview mode, and we changed our device type to a 5.5 and put it into landscape, we can see right here that we've got 2 segments. But if we were looking at a 4 and we rotate, it's only 1, because that screen is not big enough to show those 2 at the same time. So that's what the split view is doing. It's configured such that it only shows 1 or it only shows the right amount of view controllers given the current size. So that's the basics of how this UI is constructed. We have something right here in the center. You'll notice it looks kind of like a push. This is what's called a segue, and that segue has an identifier called show detail. What this is doing is when something is tapped, basically when something is tapped in this table view, this segue is going to run to transition from the master to the detail, or to show a new detail over on the right. That's the basics of how the segue works. We'll look at this show detail segue when we hop over to the code to see exactly what's going on there. So let's take a look at those 2 pieces of code, the 2 files that are in here. So the master view controller, this is our list of timestamps in the project, and they're being stored in an array called objects. And the way this works, the buttons that we have in our application, if we take a look at the simulator, we have, if we go to a supported portrait orientation, there is a edit button in the upper left, so that's this guy here. I think the simulator crashed. Let's kill that guy and run it again. So there is an edit button in the upper left, and there is a plus button on the right, so that's this right bar button. So you have a navigation item. The navigation item is this top section, this nav bar as it's called. You have a left button and a right button. Our left button is the edit button, and our right button is that plus button, and that's added with a system item called add. And the system item of add is what gives it that plus, the thing that you've seen in iOS applications far and wide. That's what that looks like. And what is going to happen with that is when it is tapped, we're going to call a function called insert new object. And insert new object is down here. And that it adds a new object to our objects array, which is basically just the NSDate. So NSDate gives us a current timestamp that gets inserted into the array, and then we set the index path to the first spot. So back up a second. An index path is a row in a section within the table view. So let's take a look at what a table view looks like to understand why we need rows and sections. If we go into our simulator and go to the settings application, This application right here is a classic table view application. Each one of these areas that's separated by gray on screen is what's called a section. So this would be the first section, this is the second section, this is the third section, this is the fourth section. And each one of the items within an individual section is a row within the table. And it's represented by a cell. So that's what that looks like. Just very basic stuff. But we have rows and sections. And what's happening here is we're creating an index path for row 0 within section 0. So essentially the first item available in the table view, that's what this index path would represent. And we're inserting a new item at that index path. So essentially we're creating a new row right at the beginning. And it's going to automatically animate in, which means it'll make room for it and the item will appear. What's happening when that happens, we'll have to take a look. So the way the table view works, the way all table views work, is through a bunch of methods called delegate methods. And what a delegate method is basically there's an object somewhere in the system that needs some information at a later time. And it gets that information by calling methods on its delegate. So in this case, the master view controller is the delegate for the table view. And it's also the data source for the table view. So all of the functions that we're going to see under this section called table view are either methods from the table view delegate or from the table view data source. Those two things will combine to give the table view the information that it needs to get started. And what happens here is the table view first says, how many sections do you have? And our table view is going to have one section. And then it's going to say, okay, for each section, how many rows do you have in that section? We only have one section. So how many rows are there in the first section? Well, there's objects.count. Objects, if you remember, is our array of timestamps. So however many timestamps there are, that's how many rows there will be. Then it says, I need a cell. I need a cell to represent section 1, row 1. So this will get called every time iOS needs a cell to show in this table view. And what's going to happen is the table view has a set of reusable cells. The reason why there's reusable cells is imagine a really long list, really large list, say 100 items. But we can only show 10 on screen at a given time. That's okay. That would cause a performance hit if we had to redraw all 100 or all 1,000 of them every time we needed a new cell to show on screen. But we really only need to create 10 cells to put in memory, and we can recycle them every time a new one comes on and just change the properties of that cell. That's what iOS does to create really smooth scrolling, and that's what's happening here. It's basically saying, hey, there's a cell that you've created. It has an identifier cell. I want you to grab one out of the reuse pool. Instead of creating a brand new cell, give me one out of the reuse pool. And that identifier of cell, if we hop back to the storyboard and we take a look at this cell up here and click on it, you'll see there's an identifier right here that says cell, and that's on the attributes inspector. That is the reuse identifier for that cell, and that's what's showing up right here. That's cool. So that's basically the cell that's going to get grabbed to get reused as we create new cells. And that cell has a couple of properties on it. It's a basic cell, so it has a text label to display whatever text we want to show inside of it. In this case, we're going to grab the object's description. So this is a string that represents the object. This is a function that you can override in any of your classes to basically give it a string representation of that object type. In this case, it's going to show that really long timestamp, since all of our objects are timestamps. And then we return the cell. So we're grabbing indexPath.row out of the objects array. So obviously that's going to correspond to the row number indexed into the objects array, and we're pulling that out. This is a cast, so we're pulling that out as an NS date. We can force this cast because we know that there's only dates being stored in there, and then we return the cell. Then the following two have to do with editing. So we want rows to be able to be edited regardless of the row. We could return false for a specific row if it was not editable, but we want them all to be edited. And the thing that we're hooking up is delete. So if the editing style is delete, then we can say go ahead and delete. We'll remove the timestamp at the current row, the one that was just deleted, and we'll call delete rows at index path, which will fade the row out of existence. So that's how that works. So that's the basics for master. One thing that we're missing is I mentioned that there was going to be some code that would run when we tap on a row that would set some options on the detail. Well, first we should look at what the detail view controller looks like. It has an outlet. Remember, an outlet is just a reference to an object inside of the view controller in the interface builder. In this case, it's a label. It was that label that was in the center of the screen. And they also in here have a detail item. So this detail item, this could create any kind of object. In this case, it's going to be a date time. And what they do here is when detail item gets set, we're going to run configure view. And what it's going to do is say if detail item is not null, then grab the description label. And if that's not null, then set its text equal to the description of detail. So basically all they're doing here is saying at the time that this item is set on the detail controller, set the label's text to description. And they're being very cautious about it. I'm doing some nil checking. So that's all that's going on there. Where are we setting the detail item? So that's in that segue. So again, taking a look at the storyboard file, if we take a look at this segue, basically this segue called show detail, that is right here. So prepare for segue. This gets called whenever a segue is about to happen, and it passes in what segue is about to happen. And if that segue's identifier is show detail, which it will be because it's the only segue that we have in our storyboard, then we run the following code. We check to see if there's an index path for the selected row. If there is, we stash it in this index path variable scoped to this block. We grab an object out of our objects array for that row as a date, just like we did before when we were configuring the cell. And then we grab the destination controller. So this segue object has a property called destination view controller, which is the view controller whose contents should be displayed at the end of the segue. So it's the one on the other side. So we're going from master to detail. So we want to grab the detail view controller out of this destination controller. And then we're setting the detail item. So we just saw that property over in the detail view controller. We're setting that detail item property to the timestamp that's coming in. And then we are good to go. Basically just setting the back button item correctly. And that's what happens. So when we tap on one of these rows, so we tap this to create a few. When we tap on this, it segues in and we show the date. That's the basics for that. It's nothing too fancy. Table view controllers are the basis of many apps inside of iOS. Most of the applications that you look at that show any real amount of data follow this pattern. So that's that. In the chat, again, please let me know where you are from. Love to have a conversation with you. Are you learning anything from this? What would you like to see next? I am probably going to transition right now to taking a look at Twilio video. Yeah, I think that's what we'll do. So let's go over and take a look at what Twilio Video is. So if we go to twilio.com/video, and I'm also going to do an update on Nightbot here because he thinks that I am going to be doing IP messaging, and I'm actually going to do video, I think. We'll see how well we can make that work. So Twilio Video. Twilio Video is a cross-platform SDK for doing multi-party video chat and also audio chat. And it's really cool. It works on JavaScript, iOS, and Android. And what's neat is it's built in Objective-C, but it works fantastically from Swift. So we'll be able to use it in our Swift applications as we're building them here. I'm just going to update my custom command for project to make sure that if it gets typed, it is showing the right thing. Before we get into that, video chat apps with Twilio Video. That's much better. And then I will send that to the chat so that people that join know what's going on. Cool. So if we take a look at this demo again, you can see there's a bunch of different things you can do. We basically need to authenticate a user, and then we'll do a call initiation, and then there's a bunch of different data channels that you can use to do different things once they're connected. But we're basically in this, we're just going to take a look at the quick start and maybe play around with some extra features that we can add to the application once we have it up and running. So what I'm going to do is I am going to real quickly switch scenes briefly, getting the project set up. I just want to clear out downloads to make this a little bit nicer of a scenario for everybody, including myself. And I will dismiss this and we'll switch back. So what I want to do is I want to grab the Twilio video quick start. So if we go to twilio.com, let me just send this to you. This is twilio.com/docs/API/video. That's what we're looking at right now. And if I do that and go over to this getting started on iOS, you'll notice that the first section of this talks about needing some account information. I have all of this configured already in my server, but what you'll need to do is create a configuration profile inside of your Twilio account, which you can get from twilio.com/trytwilio. So you create a new account on Twilio. You'll be able to get your account SID, you'll be able to create an API key and API secret, and you'll be able to generate a configuration profile. And what you'll end up with there is a bunch of basically just identifiers that you'll throw into your server-side application, because what you need to do next is hand out keys to everyone who wants to be able to participate in video chat. So what we do next is we would need a server application to do the authentication. I already have the PHP version running locally, and what I can do with that is fire that up, and we'll actually be able to talk to each other using video chat. Hopefully, if everything's working correctly with my webcam here, we should be able to do that. So if I go to my projects directory and go to quick start servers and go to the video quick start test, I can do what this says to do right here, which is run this on localhost. And if I run that on localhost, that's cool. What would be even cooler is if we could all chat with each other, but that would require you to be able to connect to my machine, which if I'm running on localhost wouldn't be possible. So we'll use something called ngrok, and that's at ngrok.com. At ngrok.com, you'll be able to get this great tool that allows you to create an HTTP tunnel, and it even lets you create your own subdomains. So I'm going to create a subdomain, if I could type, subdomain called Brent, and I'm going to tunnel HTTP over port 8000 right to localhost. So if I run that, that means that at http brent.ngrok.io, we'll be able to see our Twilio video application. So, if anybody is feeling brave, you can go to brent.ngrok.io and you can send an invite to Mushy Wendy Utica, and it'll actually connect right up, which is cool. And I can do preview my camera, and we can see. Oh, actually, I can't because it's got the wrong. Objects. So we'll do this instead from. Firefox, where I think I have the option to let it know that I would not want to use Wirecast, but instead I would want to use FaceTime, and I will leave the audio to default. And then you can see me. You can see me from a different angle, which is cool. And then I can let's see, I can probably from my other PC. Let's try this. This will be interesting. So if I do this from where I'm streaming out of, so if I go to brent.ngrok.io on my other machine, I'm going to preview my camera. Yeah, see, I need Firefox over here too. The problem is, if you get started with this stuff, Chrome, if you have more than one webcam, and that webcam is not accessible at the time that you're trying to use it, the defaults are not great. So I'm going to make a change here in my advanced settings for Chrome, content settings, and change the webcam default to XSplit. So this will be interesting. I'll change that to XSplit, and I think I need to change the microphone as well. I'll change the microphone to use default. Hopefully that'll work okay. I think the microphone's being used by my streaming software, so it might not quite work. I might set that to none. Maybe that'll work. I'll reload that. Let's see if it will allow me to do this. Nope. Still, because the microphone is on lockdown. Maybe I can set it to no microphone. Yeah, I'm going to have a problem with that. I think it's not allowing me to say don't. So, okay, I'll just say no access to microphone. That's fine. We don't really need it. Refresh that and say preview my camera. No, it still doesn't want to work. So I'm not going to be able to connect from there to there. Let's do instead a second Firefox tab. We'll put these side by side. That's fine. We'll do these side by side. Brent.ngrok.io. We'll say preview my camera. We'll say that may not work actually because it's already in use. No, it seems to have worked. That's fine. So the way this works, once everything's set up correctly, I am sending incoming invites as Sneaky Yolanda Oakland. I want to invite Sneaky Yolanda Oakland to my video chat over here. Create a super huge video loop by sending that invite. We have an incoming invite. We'll say share it, and now we've got that super loop. There's so many Brents. There's a Brent in the lower left. There's a Brent in the upper left. There's a Brent in the upper right. There's a Brent in the lower right. That's cool. That's Twilio video. That's peer-to-peer. It's working as expected. That's cool. But what would be even cooler is instead of having to monkey around with multiple browser windows, it would be really cool if we could connect this one browser window on the left to an application running on iOS. But that was just testing to make sure that everything was working correctly. Now that we have everything working correctly, let's move forward to the mobile application for this. And you do that with the download for Swift. So on that same twilio.com/docs/API/video, inside of this quick start, we can download the Swift quick start. and then just really quickly open that up, and we'll open that up in terminal as well. So switch to that directory and take a look at what's inside of it. So you'll notice that in here we have a pod file. If you're not familiar with pod file, that's using CocoaPods. So CocoaPods is a dependency manager for Swift and Objective-C applications. There's a ton of libraries out there that you can just really simply add to your application simply by adding a line to your pod file and running pod install from the terminal. That is how our things are set up. We don't actually have these in the default area, but we do have an old one, Twilio SDK, which is our voice over IP product. But what we're going to do for this, if we take a look at this pod file that we're going to be working with, you'll just see that it has a couple lines. It's saying that the source for our pods is coming from this GitHub repo, and it's saying pod Twilio conversations client. So what's going to happen is I am going to run pod install, and when I run that, it's going to go out and grab Twilio conversations client and any dependencies, any other pods that that requires to get working. So we'll do that. Pod install, and it's going to go out to CocoaPods, update all local specs. It went out and it found Conversations Client, and it also found Twilio Common, which is a dependency for Conversations Client. Now, if I had opened the project before, it would tell me to close it and then open Video Quick Start.xc workspace. But since I knew that I was going to need to open the quickstart.xc workspace, I didn't open things before that. So we will fire up XC workspace. I'll say open. Open video quickstart.xc workspace. That'll open it up inside of Xcode. And in this project structure, you'll notice this is a workspace. So instead of just a single project, we have two projects. One manages the pods, so that's the CocoaPods for the application, and the other is our project like we'd expect. And inside of the pods project is where that pod file lives. You'll notice that's the pod file that we were just looking at from the terminal. Then we can open up this video quick start, and we can go into the source folder, and we'll see we've got some classes in there that we can work with. And then we can also open up the storyboard, and inside of the storyboard we'll find we have some controls here. We've got a hang up button that's way over here in the bottom right. We've got what appears to be a local preview and a status label. We'll do some work to clean this UI up a little bit, maybe make it look a little bit nicer with the remaining time we have in the stream. I just wrote a blog post that will show you how to do everything that we do today. So let me link that real quick. Just link this blog post real quick so that if you wanted to, you can follow along with some of what we're going to do later. So this is how to build and design iOS video chat applications. And I'm actually going to take that title and drop it into Twitch too. Here's the blog post. So this is the blog post that we're going to be working off of. And I'm also going to update the video title for Twitch. I need my channel. Where is my channel? And I want to update just this title so that people know that we are now building video chat applications during the rest of this broadcast. So that's what we're going to work on now. We're going to basically rebuild what is in that blog post, as much of it as we can during the rest of this section. So with that in place, we need to update a few things. So in order for our application to connect to our video application, it needs to get a token. So the token is what the PHP server is getting for us. And we have that running, not on localhost anymore, but we have that running from our ngrok URL. And one of the reasons that I did that, one of the reasons that I exposed that to the public internet like that is because ngrok will give me an HTTPS URL for that. And if you've used iOS lately, from a developer perspective, iOS wants you to use HTTPS. And in fact, if you don't use HTTPS, you have to go into your project and say that you are okay with people not using HTTPS directories in your application. So that's something that you'll have to address. I agree. Bold big flank. Ngrok is an absolute godsend, especially if you're writing Twilio applications. You need to have Twilio reach out to your server during development. You haven't deployed it to a server yet. It'd be pretty hard to test that if we didn't have these awesome tunneling tools. I love it. So basically we're saying when you need to fetch a token, go out and grab that from brent.ngrok.io at this token.php file. And what's going to happen is we're going to do that when the view loads. So the view loads, we get the token, we use a token to make a request using NSURL session to the token URL, and when it comes back, we'll have some data that comes back with it. We'll grab the token value out of the results that came back, and we'll initialize a client. And if the token was manually set, I initialize right away. So that would be if you were using the testing tools. So if you're using the testing tools, then you might have grabbed a token for yourself. If you do that, you can set that right here. But we're going to grab it from the server the way you would want to in your production application. And then we initialize the client, and this sets a few things at the end of view did load. But initialize client here creates an access manager based on that access token that we got back from the PHP server. And it creates a conversations client. So the conversations client is what manages the video chat possibilities. And then it listens. It listens for incoming invites and that sort of thing. And then we also set up the local media. So this is our local camera. And we add a camera track to the local media object, and then we attach that to the local media view. That was that little gray box that was inside of the assistant, or not this, the storyboard when we were looking. That's what's in the bottom left. And then we set the identity. So the identity is our username. We set the identity into the identity label text that was in the bottom left of the application. So I'm going to run this. And I should run this on device so that we can see it working for real. So I'm going to plug in my iPhone, and then it's going to launch photos, and I don't want photos. And then I'm going to set this to build and target my phone. The next thing we need to do is I need to mirror my screen so you can see what's going on it. So we'll do QuickTime Player. And we want to do a new movie recording, and we want to set the source of the movie recording to the phone. What that should do, again, don't want photos, need to change that default. What this will do is it actually gives me a view of my actual iPhone, whatever my iPhone sees currently, and then we'll run the application on the iPhone. You get to see some of the apps that I have installed. I don't use most of those. That's why they're on the last page. Imagine that. All the way over on the left are apps that I don't use. Anyways, we are building. We have built successfully. It's now installing on the phone. And what we can do once it's up and running is we'll show it side by side with the browser application. So there's our application. It has built and is currently running. And if we go back to Firefox and size this correctly to be right next to it, I'm just going to do a refresh. You'll notice down here that we have, here's one problem that we're going to want to address, is that our name, and these are using randomly generated names. The PHP server that we have running to give tokens generates a random username and chucks that into the token. So the first thing that we're going to want to address when we get there is we can't actually see the whole username down here. So it'd be very hard for me to send an invite to this person in our current setup because I wouldn't know their full name. I'm going to rotate the landscape just so we can grab that correctly. We're going to need to resize this guy because it's too big. And then we'll resize this to work with it. There we go. Actually, that still didn't help us any at all. So I'm gonna do it the other way around. I'll send an invite to the browser, and the way we'll do that is there's a plus button in the top right of the iOS application, and we get a name in the browser. It's Yawning Danny Quantico. We'll send that invite. And now it's showing my local preview. And there's the invite popping up in FaceTime or in Firefox. And if I say share it, then it'll make the connection. And you'll notice we have the phone camera on the top of the browser over here, and down below or in the main screen you can see me straight onto the camera. Well, actually the camera is right here because this is coming off my Mac, but we basically have our standard video call happening. And again, you get two me's here. And I'm going to hang up that call using the hang up button in the iOS application just to make sure that it's working, and it is. So that's cool. So everything is working as expected out of the quick start. That's a great start. That's sort of like really quick, like 5 minutes to go from I don't know what's going on. I don't know if this video application thing is a thing that I'm going to want to do. Like we could have had the PHP server up and running and the iOS application up and running. If I would ever stop talking, we would have had that up and running in like 5 minutes maybe. But since I was talking, it took a little bit longer, but it still was like about 10 minutes to go from scratch to having a video application working between my browser and my iOS device. But what we want to do now, since we just have a basic application, and to be honest, it could use a little bit of help from the US perspective. Oh, hey Eddie, welcome to the chat. Have a fun time talking with some of the people that we have here. We've got Bold Big Flank, who's been around for a bit of this, so feel free to say hi. It looks like we've got BPAF, who's a regular visitor to this stream. But anyway, say hi to everyone. We're working on Twilio video right now. Some tools at your disposal if you want them. There's this project command which lets everyone know what's going on stream. We've gotten past the iOS basics. We're now into the Twilio video portion of this show. And I just got it working between the iPhone and my Firefox browser, which is cool. We're good. So let's take a look at this storyboard. And I mentioned the first thing I really wanted to clean up was this label-y situation we've got going on here. I really don't like that it's getting cut off. It's only like this wide, so it's really going to get cut off for pretty short names anyways, and it's not doing me a whole lot of good down there. So I'm going to do what I do when I don't like things in my application. I'm just going to delete it. So we'll delete that. Now that's going to cause us some problems. We've already got like a red thing going on here. What it's caused is that we don't have Y positioning for this guy anymore, because it turns out that it was positioned based on that label down below. So let's just resolve that now before we get any further. What I want to do is I want to create this structured such that it is whatever the iOS default is from the bottom. Turns out it's probably going to be about 8. But what I want to do is I want this in the bottom left corner. Whatever iOS thinks is sane defaults for bottom left corner. And just like we did before, I want to control drag. I want to show you another way that you can do this control drag. I can control drag to things in the view Or I can actually drag all the way over to the list and pick the specific thing that I want to create the constraint based off of. So if I drop right here, it's going to create a constraint, a positioning constraint related to remote media. So I'm dragging from local media to remote media. Let's say I didn't want to do it that way. Let's say instead I knew that I wanted to create a constraint from local media to remote media. I can actually do it right here too. So if I control drag from here to there, it works the same as if I did it inside of the interface builder itself. And that's going to give me a pop-up. And this leading space to container, that's what's positioning it horizontally. It's saying stay 8 pixels from the left edge. But we also want bottom space to container. And the container in this case is the remote view. That's the big black box. So I say bottom space to container, and now if we look, we've got blue lines, which means everything's satisfied, and it's exactly where Xcode expects it to be. That's cool. That means that if we were to fire up our preview assistant, and we were to take a look at this for an iPhone 4 or an iPhone 6 or iPhone 5, iPhone 6, iPhone 6 Plus, they're all going to position correctly, and they're all going to position correctly when it's rotated as well. So we've got it right up against the left side and right up against the bottom side, regardless of whether it's a huge phone or a small phone, whether it's in portrait or landscape. That means we've got the auto layout set up correctly, and I'm confident with that change. Now, what will be a problem is if I were to build the code right now, you'll notice that we are going to get a womp womp error. I believe we should get a womp womp error. We didn't. I don't know why. Oh, I know why. Because we didn't delete we didn't actually delete the code portion that corresponds to the label. So we deleted it out of the UI, but we also need to delete it here because we don't have that outlet anymore. Now, if I were to build, obviously it's going to fail. We get the nice womp womp. We tap the womp womp. It tells us that the value of type view controller has no member identity label. We tap that. This is how we debug. We take a look at this, and it says self.identitylabel.text equals self.client.identity. This is what was setting that label to the username, and that's a problem because we don't have this label anymore. So first things first, this is obviously not going to work. But what do we want to do instead? So we have some options. I vote. So before this said logging in. So that was an indicator that we're not logged in yet. Lets the users know we're not logged in yet. But what we want to do is when it is logged in, set that to the username. Well, we have a place we can stash that. This is that navigation item that we messed around with before that held the left and right button. Another thing that it has is a title, which it's currently set to no call connected. I see that right here. But it also has a prompt. And this prompt, we can set this prompt to logging in ... like it was set on the label before. And when we do that, you'll notice it shows it up at the top. So we can use this for our temporary indication that things are happening. And we can also set that to the username once everything's connected. So let's take a look at this now. Oh, the remote media is not positioned where it thinks it should be. That's an easy one. We'll just say update frames. That's cool. Local media is not positioned where it thinks it should be. So we'll say update all frames. Just update them all. Put them where they should be. There we go. So everything is positioned in Interface Builder the way it expects it to be. We have this logging in text. And if we come back over here, I'm kind of wondering what is setting things to red. Ah, here it is. You know what? I don't like that red. This is the bar tint color. I don't very much care for that that red. So let's make a tweak to that too. I think I want the no, let's just leave it the default white. That's fine. We'll just get rid of the tint color change. We'll get rid of the tint color and the bar tint color change. And also the title text attributes. I think I'm just going to leave it the default. We can come back and style it later. We wouldn't be able to style it if we didn't comment these out. So let's take a look at what things look like. Actually, I think I've just Nope, I thought I caused an error. I did not cause an error. Take a look at what things look like now. We should have a white bar instead of the red bar. We should have black text instead of the white text. We'll be back where we wanted to be as a good baseline. Okay, cool. That's a good baseline for the design. I think that red is too bold. And the problem with red is it's not culturally neutral. Red is a pretty bad color to use in certain countries, so we won't do that. We'll go back to the default white with black text. If I rotate, you notice everything works the way we'd expect it to. And we don't have that label down in the bottom left anymore. You'll notice we do have one problem though. We have this logging in here now instead of the username. So let's fix that. And we can do that pretty easily. We'll come down to where we had this self.identity label.text, and we'll instead do self.navigation item. So this is the bar at the top of the screen. Navigation item dot prompt. So prompt is the line of the text at the top that says logging in currently. And we'll set that, I think it's just prompt. We'll set that equal to the self.client.identity call that is just above it from when we had the identity label. And now if I run this, we should be able to watch it. Happen. So I'll rotate to landscape, wait for the application to launch, and I'll switch over to QuickTime. Here it goes. Now you'll see it transition from saying logging in at the top to the username. That's probably not the best way to format that. So let's do a string here, and I'll show you how string interpolation works inside of Swift. So I want to say logged in as, and then I want this string, this self.client.identity, to render into that string. And languages have features for this. It's called string interpolation. In Swift, you do a slash and then parentheses around the thing that you want to have interpolated into the string. So slash parentheses. Whatever's in the parentheses will render into the string at that point. So this will say logging in as whatever the username is in the current client. So if we run that again, I'll watch it crash and reload. And then once it loads up, we'll switch over to the iOS application, and we should see logged in as whatever random name. Oh no, optional. That's funny. Okay, so what does this mean? What has happened here? What has happened here is that identity is an optional, which means it could exist or it might not exist. And if we do this and say, why don't you unwrap that, it should work correctly. Let me just double check. I'm pretty sure that that's what I had to do before. For some reason it unwraps correctly when you set it to text. I think it's because it knows it's a string. Wait, I know what the problem is. It's not that. It's not this. It's that we need that as a string. No, that's not it either. Stop. Downcast only unwraps optional. Did you mean to use exclamation point? I think I meant what I said. I don't know if I meant what I said. So the problem here is that this is actually not a string. I don't know why it's not. Okay, so because of interpolation, it's trying to interpolate into the string whatever the object is there. I'm wondering if I can do description off here. It doesn't look like I can. So they haven't written a description method there for that. So what I could do is I could do an if let. So I can say if I can say if self.client .identity, which should be, it's a string optional, so that's cool. If let's call it username equals self.identity as string, then, or maybe I should just do this. I think this right here, this clause right here should do it. If username, this is if let. So if let username equals self.client dot identity. So what this is saying is, okay, I know that identity could be nil. It's either going to be a string or it could be nil. If it's not nil, if client.identity is not nil, then set username equal to that string value. And then in here, I should be able to just do self.identity label dot text equals username, actually, username. If we build that, no, what do we have? View control. Oh, right. Navigation item. Someone stop me. We got rid of the identity label. Self.navigationItem.text. So that's the logging in prompt. What do we have wrong now? Oh, dot prompt. Jeez. I can type all the things correctly. All right. That should get it. That should configure everything that we needed correctly to set the thing at the top to say logged in as whatever that username is. Oh, except we got rid of the string interpolation. So logged in as, and then we'll interpolate username into the string, and then run it again. Sorry for the hiccups there. I don't know. The little nerves come into the code a little bit every now and then. This should do it though. I'm confident this should do it. Okay, so we have logged in as Luscious Gracie Portland up at the top. So that is indicating that we have connected correctly to the PHP server. We've got a token. We've got everything we need to create a video connection to another user. We have another user sitting right here. We'll have log in. We know it's, we'll do it from the other side this time. So it's Luscious Gracie Portland. We don't have anything that's going to pop up over on iOS to, we don't have anything over in iOS that's going to pop up to say, do you want to connect this call or not? It's just going to do it by default because that's the way the code's written. We could change that to pop up something to say, hey, do you want to accept this call or not? This is me coming from the Mac that I'm doing the coding on. If we send the invite over to iOS, things will automatically connect over there. And you'll look at my ceiling for a second, but then you'll look at me directly. So that's me over there from the Mac. And then you've got me locally on the iOS. Again, many Brents. I'm sorry, there's so much of me right now. Let's deal with that. Get rid of that. Don't want to look at that too much. There's nobody else here, or otherwise I would maybe do that a different way. Maybe I could call Eddie. Eddie could join brent.ngrok.io and tell me what his username is, and then maybe I could call him instead of calling myself. But in lieu of that, let's continue to improve the way this application looks. I don't really like this hang up button, right? I want something that I would be happy to show my friends, that I would be happy to throw out there. So it wouldn't be text in that case. It would actually probably be something more like that, like a classic hang up button or something like that. That's what we'll do. I'm not going to show you how I created those. I used a program called Sketch, though, if you're curious. So with Sketch, I created a bunch of these icons. No, I don't want to update yet. I created a bunch of these icons. You can see what they look like here. And if you're curious about where I got the icons themselves, you can go to thenounproject.com. And you can search for anything here. So if you wanted a button for like a frying pan, maybe you're making a cooking application. Maybe you like eggs. I don't know. I don't know what your preferences are. But if you're making an application that involves cooking, this might be a cool button that you could create. And I took these, I basically, for workflow, I downloaded this as an SVG. And then I brought the SVG into Sketch. So then I manipulated the image itself into a circle that I then brought into my application. It's pretty simple. I won't go through how it works. It's not terribly difficult. But if you want to do that yourself, that's what I used. It was the Noun project coupled with Sketch. So we have this stack of buttons that we can work with. We have a hang up button, we have a mute button, we have a switch camera button, and we have an unmute button. And if we wanted to work with those, we need to take those and bring them into our Xcode project. And we do that in something called an asset collection. In this asset collection, we can create a new image set, and we will rename the image set to hangup. And then I can drag the hangup button into this 3x placeholder. I didn't create, for this application, I did not create 2x and 1x versions. I only created the 3x version. It's going to run correctly, but it wouldn't be memory optimized on older devices. So if you are building a design, you want to create these 2x and 1x representations of your images as well. For the purposes of this, we won't do that because we don't really need to. Let's address the hang up button first. And we will grab the hang up button here. And the first thing we want to do is we want to change it so that it doesn't have a title anymore. So remove the hang up text. The next thing we want to do is with that button selected, we want to change the constraints that are driving its height and width. Currently, they're set to 61 and 30. And I think what we want, let me see what I used in this project that I built, because that worked pretty good. Pretty sure it was either 40 or 60. I think it was 60. So let's change this width to 60 and this height to 60. So our button's going to be square. 60 by 60. And with our button selected, we go back to the attributes inspector, and there's a spot for image. And we'll set the image to hang up. And you'll notice that things go crazy over here. What's going on is that because the size in here wasn't really specified, it really wants to show it where these dotted lines are. So again, that's easy to resolve. With the button selected, we can click on the button. I'll click on the button up here. With the button selected, we can go to this guy and say update frames. And then there we go. We got a nice square button over off on the left. Now, there's no application that I've ever used for video that sticks the hang up button over on the bottom right. It's usually centered, so that's pretty easy to fix. I think we're already the right distance from the bottom of the screen. Let's just double check. It should be 8. Yeah, trailing space, no, bottom space. Bottom space is 8. 8 is great. That's the distance that this remote view over here is, or local view is over here. But what we're missing is we want this to be centered. So I will just, okay, we have to be careful here. So it's not inside of, from a project structure, or not project structure, view structure. Here we have the local media inside of the remote media, but here we have the hang up button inside of the view. The difference is remote media only takes up below the nav bar, and view takes up everything. And the relationship here is that hang up button is inside of this thing that takes up everything currently. And we need to be careful, because if we do the control drag stuff that we've done before inside of here, the remote media covers this portion. And if I make a constraint here, it's not gonna behave correctly. I actually want the constraint to be with the whole view. And this is where I think it's easier sometimes to make the layout constraints in this structure over here. And I can just control drag from the button to this view object up above and say that I want it centered horizontally. And we're getting a constraint issue. So if I take a look, what is the constraint? Well, it's a conflict. So we have 3 things that are at conflict. We have, we've told it that we want it centered, and we've also told it that we want it 8 from the edge, and we've also told it we want it to be 60 width. Now the 60 width one's not really a problem. It's these other 2 things that are causing the problem, and pretty easy to resolve this. So if we select the button, come back over to, what is this? The size inspector. It's the one that looks like a ruler. and we come down, we'll see this trailing space to super view. This is the one we don't want. So if you click it and hit delete, now things are orange instead of red, and orange is good. Orange means good things. It just means that it's not positioned the way, in the view, it's not positioned the way Xcode thinks it should be, which means your visual representation doesn't match reality, which is fine. We want reality. So we click the button and we say update frames, and it moves to where we wanted it, which is right in the center. So awesome. We have a button that now has an image instead of just text, and it's positioned directly in the center. Let's go ahead and run this back on the phone again. And I'll take a sip of water. And once it starts up, we'll hop back over and take a look at it. So there we go. We've got, don't care about alerts. I'm pretty sure I put on do not disturb. I'm still getting alerts. Now we've got a hang up button right in the center of the screen. If you notice down here, as I tap it, it says disconnect, which means we know it's still working. So we haven't had to change any code to turn that into a picture button. All we did was things inside of UI Builder to make it look cool. In the blog post, if you read the blog post after this session, you'll notice I did everything in terms of positioning the button from code. And that's just another option. You don't have to do this inside of the visual editor. You can also do this from code. Totally up to you. It's totally up to your preferences, what you do there. But that is how I'm choosing to do it here. The reason I chose to do it in code, the reason I chose to do it from code in the other one, is it's hard in text, in like a text-based blog post. It's very difficult to describe the control dragging. You have to create a lot of animated images, and it just clutters the page, and it's hard to follow. But in video, it's a lot easier for me to just do this visually. So we still have our hang up button. We just have an image for it this time instead. Now I had some other fancy images, some other features to add, and the subject of this one is it's really cool that our phones have 2 cameras, most of them now. That makes things really nice. But we don't currently have the option to change that in our iOS application. And it's really, I found, like so blindingly simple to make this change. So let's just do it real quick. So we do switch camera is what we'll call the image. And we'll give our button a nice little toggle the camera image, and we'll go back to our code, and actually we'll go back to our storyboard. Now we need a new button. The easiest way I think to do this in this case is to just copy and paste. So we'll copy the hang up button, we'll paste the hang up button. So we have 2 buttons side by side. I'm going to put switch camera to the right of the hang up button. Oh, again, want to be careful. So I'm going to release and undo that change. We want to make this constraint right here. So I'm going to say that we want this button horizontal spacing between the 2, and then we'll just change that. So we got a weird placement, right? So it's going to say that it wants it a certain distance apart from it. Right now it's -50. We don't want -50. I think we want 8. Maybe -8. Let's resolve it. Let's see what it looks like when we... Oh, we also need vertical position. So this one we'll drag to view and say bottom space to bottom layout guide. And then we'll just change these both. So this should be 8 from the bottom and 8 to the right of hang up button. If we select our new button and we say update frames, there we go. That's exactly where we want it. We just have the wrong image. Easy enough to change. Come to this image property and change it to switch camera. Simple as that. We now have a hang up button and a switch camera button. What we don't have is any code to run when the switch camera button gets called. So again, we'll go to the assistant editor for that. Switch it back to automatic instead of preview. And we'll pick the view controller that we want to work with. Hide this. And what we want to do with switch camera is just create an action. We've done this before. We'll scroll down to a good place to put it. We'll put it right underneath the hang up button. Control drag from the switch camera button to that place in code right underneath hang up. Set this to be an action, and we'll call it switch camera. So cool. Now we have a function that'll run. When we tap the switch camera button. Let's write some code to run when that happens. And what we want to do is we want to switch from front camera to back camera. In this case, that's really easy. There is an object in the iOS SDK for Twilio Video called the camera capturer. And if we take a look at that, we can take a look at the camera capture.h, which is the Objective-C header for this, to just kind of, we don't have to understand Objective-C here to see what's going on. We're just kind of looking for properties and methods. And we have something here called flip camera. It says flips the capturer's camera. And that's exactly what we want. So we want to flip from one camera to the other. So if we go back to our view controller and go to single code, single file. So we want to call self.camera, and we want to call its flip camera function that we just saw in the header. So if we do that and we run that on our iPhone, and we queue up this guy. More Brents. Sorry, I never got word back from Eddie about whether he would like to join the video call. So you're going to have to see me 4 times again. So this time we have Callus. Oh, here, you probably want to see that. This time we have Callus Wendy Essex that we can send an invite to. Let's do preview camera to make sure we've got everything working locally. Yep, that's me right there. And we can send an invite to the iPhone like so, and everything will connect up. Now that's cool. Once again, you can see me right there. And if I do flip camera, you can see the Mac that I'm coding from, provided everything works correctly. Uh-oh, looks like we got a bug. Oh, received memory warning. Uh-oh. That's not cool. Oh, you know what happened? If anybody is savvy to what happened, I'll give you a second to try to guess it in chat before I fix it. There's something we didn't do correctly here. So we go to main storyboard. I'm going to show you what happened. So I created this button by copying the hang up button and pasting it. What do you think happened? You can actually see it right here. You can see it right here. So what happened is, if we right click on this, you'll see the mistake, which is that we have 2 actions for our button. We have one that's calling hang up and one that's calling switch camera. That doesn't work. So if we delete this, we'll see that get fixed. So we'll delete that and rerun the application. That's a pretty silly mistake. If you copy buttons, make sure you remove their handlers, or at least remove the existing handler before adding new ones. Easy mistake to make. Okay, so we have Golden Bobby Utica. Again, these are randomly generated names. So preview the camera locally, make sure it's working. That's me. That's cool. This is Twilio, which is what we're using. And we will send the invite over to the iOS application. That is me once again. And now this time, if I tap that awesome little switch camera button, instead of seeing 4 me's, now you see like however many me's it is when there's 3 me's on the video screen. What's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I guess now? That's cool. This is my keyboard. And we can switch back to me. Cool, huh? And I'll hit hang up and we'll disconnect the call. Cool. So we've now added a feature. So instead of the just the simple hang up button that we had in the original application, now we've got switch camera. So just briefly, I noticed we've got a spike in viewership. What we're doing right now is I am taking a look at Twilio Video. Twilio Video is a cross-platform WebRTC based multi-party video framework, SDK, that works in JavaScript, iOS, and Android. And what we're doing is we are connecting our Firefox browser. Up to a video server that we have running, and we are sending an invite over to our iOS application, and then we have a video call. I actually need to restart the iOS application for that to work. But basically what we're doing is creating a peer-to-peer video connection. Let me rerun the iOS application and show you how that works for those of you that have just joined. But basically we have cross-platform video working between Firefox in the browser using the JavaScript SDK and my iPhone over here. So I have my iPhone user is logged in as Callus Yolanda. These are random names, by the way, generated by the PHP server that we have running. Callus Yolanda Liberty. We will send an invite. That's my ceiling fan up there. Accidentally tapped the invite button. That's going to kill the call, I'm pretty sure. But you can see things working here over in the browser. If I flip the camera, now you can see my laptop in the screen. So that's using peer-to-peer video, WebRTC powered, but heading over to iOS, making the connection over to the JavaScript browser. A bunch of new people just showed up. If you could do me a favor and let me know in the chat if you're a software developer, and also if you are, regardless of whether you're a software developer or not, let me know where you're from. I'm just curious to see where people are tuning in from. And thanks for joining. Let's keep working on this chat application. The next feature that I want to add to this application is I want to allow us to mute the microphone. So if you're in a crowded room or something like that, sometimes you want to join a video conference, but you don't want people to hear what's going on where you're located. And that's pretty easy to do with this SDK. I am going to once again create a button here. So I'm going to do the copy paste thing again, but we're going to be smarter about it this time. Don't worry. Let me stop this application too. Okay, so what we want to do this time is we want to position the button 8 from the bottom and 8 to the left of hang up. So we'll do that really quickly using auto layout. This is our new button. We will drag to hang up button and say we want the horizontal spacing based on the hang up button, and we'll drag up to the view and say that we want it vertically spaced to the bottom layout guide. And then we'll come over to the size inspector here and tweak these. So we want it to be -8 from the hang up button. So that'll move it just to the left of hang up button. And we want this bottom space once again to be 8 off of the bottom. And then, oh, you know what? We set those on the wrong one, didn't we? Let's do update. None of these changed. That's not cool. Which button is which? So if I right click, I guess it doesn't matter. They both have the same. They both have the same setup. These should have complained though. Somewhere we have an interface builder problem. It's not letting me know that there are conflicts. I want, just for kicks, we'll move this to where we wanted it, and we'll change its image so that we know which one we're working with. This image we want to be the mute. Oh, you know what? We didn't create that image yet. So once again, we need to create an image inside of our asset collection. So we have switch camera. So for mute, it's going to be a toggle. So we're going to need to be able to mute things, and we're going to need to be able to unmute things. So what we want to do this time is create two images. We're going to need mute and we're going to need unmute. So we just create an image set. We come in here and change this to mute. We make an image set, and we come in and change that new one to unmute. And we'll come to the mute one, and we will drag in this icon that I created for mute. Again, using the nounproject.com coupled with Sketch to piece together a nice looking button. And we'll go to unmute, and we'll do the same for this unmute button that I created. Those aren't, no, that's not right. That's unmute. That's unmute. What is going on? Unmute. Mute. Why are these? Oh wait, no, that was right. Jeez, I'm losing it today. That's definitely the correct one. We want microphone on. Cool. Yes, I should reintroduce myself actually at this point. I guess we've been going strong for about an hour and a half. I am Brent Schooley. I am a developer evangelist for a company called Twilio. We do a variety of things that make it easy for software developers to connect people together. And what we're working with today, right now, is a product called Twilio Video, which is a cross-platform WebRTC-based multi-party video, peer-to-peer video solution. So we're creating a video chat app, essentially. And I'm adding a feature right now to both basically allow us to mute and unmute. Hey, Kush, how's it going, man? We got some Twitch staff up in the house all of a sudden. Cool. So what we're doing right now is adding one more feature. We should have enough time to add this one more feature, and that feature is to allow us to mute and unmute the microphone in our video chat application. We just started up creating some images inside of our asset collection. We've got one for mute. We've got one for unmute. That's awesome. That's totally what we need. And we head over now back to our storyboard, and we should see that mute button populate in, and it did. That's cool. It looks like it's in the right place based on where it's positioned, but we know by the red box that it's not. So what we need, hey, thanks for the follow, Kush. That's awesome. Welcome to the club. The button says it does not have an X or a Y constraint. And that's probably true because it's probably all sorts of messed up because we copied and pasted it instead of dragging it in. And it's also not even in the right location. Oh, it looks like we even have, let's see, we might even have an extra one. Okay, so it's not where we want it. We want it out here next to this other button. Okay, now it's floating in space. That's way better than what we had before, believe me. And if we drag up to view, I want to say that we want it a certain spacing from the bottom layout guide, and we want it configured a certain space away from horizontal space from hang up button. And now we'll just come over here and change those values because they're guaranteed to not be what we want. We want the leading space to hang up button to be -8. -8. No, you know what? That should be trailing space. We'll fix that here in a second. That should be trailing space. We want this bottom spacing to be 8, so we'll make a tweak there and change that to 8. And I'm actually going to delete that other constraint's going to cause all sorts of problems. We don't want leading space. We want trailing space. So if I come back here and I drag, so leading space is how far is the beginning from the edge, and and trailing space is how far is the right edge from the next thing. So we wanted trailing space there, and I just grabbed the wrong one. So we want that, and in fact, I think we could probably do that by moving it. No, it's not going to let me do that. If we were to move this, yeah, if we move this correctly over to here, and then we do that and say drag to hang up button and say horizontal spacing. Now it'll create the trailing space that I wanted, and we can set that to the 8 that it needs to be. And that should set everything up nicely. We still have the hang up button straight down the middle, and now we've got our two feature buttons off to either side. And I think right now, before we add the mute, since we've got a bunch of new viewers, I wanted to show you this working before we add any new features to it. So the way this is currently set up, I've got Firefox running. We can throw a camera in here. So now you see me coming off of my Mac, dead on. And then we're also going to have the application running over here on an iPhone. This browser is connected as Luscious Kendra Kane. This is a random name generated off of the PHP server that gave us the token. The iPhone application, you can see in the top right, or the top portion here, is logged in as Zesty Tammy Vale. And what I can do is I can send an invite from the browser to Zesty Tammy Vale. And when I do that, when I say send invite, it's automatically going to connect up to the iOS application, and you're going to see me a bunch of times. And I know that's crazy. But one of the things that we hooked up so that you wouldn't have to see so many of me is the button on the right of the hang-up, which allows me to flip the camera to the rear camera, and now you can see my keyboard instead, or maybe the water glass that I've emptied in the period of time that we've been talking. I can switch it back to me, and we can end the call with the hang-up button. That's cool. That's a really full-featured cross-platform application. Yeah, I know, right? That's our peer-to-peer application. You can see that it's actually working. But what we haven't done is we just added this button for muting, but we haven't added the mute functionality. The first thing we need to do, we learned from the last time we copied and pasted a button, is we need to get rid of this button action that we had from what we copied and pasted. So we'll get rid of that first. So now our button's not doing anything, which is what we want since it's a brand new button. We'll go to the assistant editor and we'll change this to automatic, and we'll pick our view controller. And now we're looking at our view controller class. Again, earlier we went through how the connection works, how it requests a token from our PHP server that we have running here. How it's making a request to brent.ngrok.io through a thing called ngrok, which you can find at ngrok.com. That basically creates a tunnel, HTTP tunnel to the port that I picked. In this case, it was port 8000, which is where our PHP server is running. That grabs a token, and that token contains a username that's randomly generated from the PHP server. We have seen how we can make a call to the browser. We can have peer-to-peer video. We've created a hang-up button, and we have, at this point, we have the switch camera button working. So those two things are already set up. What we need to do now is we need to create a mute button. And what we're going to do for that one, since we need to do some toggling, we are going to create the function down below our switch camera. We'll drag out from here, right underneath that. I know that's kind of small, so we'll do an action, and we'll call this function toggle mute. All right, this one's going to be a little bit more complicated, but not terribly so. A little more complicated than the one above. Since we had a camera object and all we had to do was say switch cameras, that was super easy. This time we have two states, right? We have mute and unmute. So we need to be able to toggle between them, and we also need to get access to another object of Twilio, Twilio video. In this case, the thing that we want to work with is the local media. So we have this TWC local media class. So Twilio conversations local media. If I go to the header for this class, I can take a look. This is the Objective-C header. I know Objective-C is frightening, it's scary, whatever. It's not that bad. And in fact, all of the Swift is working off of this Objective-C header. What we have here, though, what we can see is that we've got a microphone muted property. That's the property that we want to work with because we want to see, are we muted, are we not muted? And then decide what to do based on whether we currently have audio going out or not. And that makes this super simple. So we want to gain access to that local media. Now that could be, if we don't have local media, that could be nil. So we want to do a let conditional binding check. So if self.localMedia is not nil, then we'll set it to a variable called local. Thank you for the follow. I have lasers. If you're finding this useful, please follow. Then you'll know when I am streaming next, and you can get a notification so that you can join in right when we get started. So if we have a local media object, then it's going to get set to this local object. And then we can just check if local dot microphone muted, not added, but microphone muted. And if it is muted, we can run some code. Otherwise, if it's not muted, we can run some other code. And what we'll do is if we are muted, then we will set microphone muted equal to false. So we're just basically toggling the state. So if it's muted, set it to not muted. And then we also need to set the image. Oh, you know what we didn't do? Okay, so what I wanted to do right now that I'm not going to be able to do, what my next line of code would have looked like would have been self.mute button. Notice, because I didn't do it yet, we don't have a mute button. We don't have access to the mute button's properties or anything because that button only exists in UI form. We haven't created a property for it inside of our file. Our view controller file. So what we need to do is similar to what we did in the hello world way at the beginning of this thing, is we need to create an outlet. And an outlet is just the reference from the UI file to the code file. It gives us a property so that we can access that button at runtime. We control drag over to the file and create an outlet, and we'll call it mute button. And then say connect. And what this outlet gives us is programmatic access to the button that we created in the interface builder. Heading back to viewcontroller.swift, now inside of our toggle mute, we can say self.mute button. And what we want to do is we want to change the image. So when we tap the button, we're going to mute or we're going to unmute, and we need the button to reflect that change. So what we want to do is we want to set the image, and we're going to create a UI image. So UI image, and we're going to use the constructor for UI image. If I could type correctly, that should be lowercase. We'll use the constructor that takes a named, so image named. So we're creating an image based on an image name, and in this case, the one that we want is mute. Since we just set the microphone to unmuted, meaning audio is coming out, obviously, we want to toggle the button back to indicate that if it's tapped, it will mute. And we do that for state normal, UI control state.normal. So not a special button state. Then we do just the opposite down here. So local.microphone muted equal to true. So if we've tapped the button and the microphone is not muted, then set it to muted. And then we'll set the mute button's image to UI image named unmute. So this is just grabbing the images out of the asset collection. These are the names that we gave those images inside of the asset collection. And this is also for .normal. And that's pretty much it. So what it's doing, again, what it is doing is it's grabbing the local media. So the local media is the video and the audio coming from the device. And it's grabbing that local media, if it exists, and it's checking the microphone to see whether it's muted or not, and then it's toggling some settings based on the current state. And that's that. We can run the application. It's going to be kind of hard for me to do the audio demonstration correctly without causing massive amounts of feedback, but we will see the button toggle. And that's probably good enough for now. The audio setup for doing this correctly we're not quite there, I don't think, with the current stream, because I wasn't anticipating doing this. I was actually going to use our chat APIs to build an application. Decided to go with video instead on the fly since I just wrote a blog post. In fact, if you want to check this blog post out later, we're working basically the features that are defined in this blog post is what I'm talking about right now. So that's that. So in our Firefox browser, we are going to send a request to Vivacious Quincy Fresno now. And we'll send the invite out, and it'll connect us up. Local media gets created, and then I'm going to tap on the mute button. Watch here. I'll tap on the mute button, and you'll see the button toggle between the two states. The microphone is also muting. I don't know that there's a really good way to show that with my current setup. Maybe if I do this again, I'll get that set up correctly. And if you're just joining, we also have a switch camera button that we built earlier. I'll wave from over there. Oh, you know what? We just my cable came out. But you saw it. It switched. It's right there. Basically, it switched right here. But I lost connection to the QuickTime. Thanks for the follow. That's awesome. Thanks for joining. So that's that. I think I can reconnect QuickTime here, so that if we want to do some more of this, we'll be able to. If you're curious about, if you're an iOS developer and you're curious about how to present your screen the way I'm doing, I'm basically using QuickTime. If I could get photos to stop launching, that would be great. What we're going to do first things first, I'm going to do another well-known trick is I want to set what happens. I guess that doesn't happen in there anymore. I want to change it so that it doesn't keep... Oh, thanks for the follow, Alan Revenger. I want to set it up so that it doesn't launch photos every time I make a connection, but I'll do that later. We go to New Movie Recording, and it's automatically set up to do it, but you pick your phone out of the list here, and it'll show up inside of a QuickTime window. And it's showing live everything that happens on your phone, so be careful with that. But that's what I'm using to project. Let's just make sure that that's still working before we move on. I will refresh Firefox, and we'll give this one more go. I wanted to show that switch camera working, but I also need to make sure that I don't unplug my phone when I do that. So preview camera, connect right up, switch over to QuickTime, see what our name is. This time we are Luscious Victoria St. Paul. So these are random. Each segment of that username is randomized from a big long list. So there's adjectives, there's a name, and then there's a location. We'll send the invite. We'll connect up to the phone again. And this time I'll be very careful about my lightning cable, and I'll switch camera and show you the blog post. Yeah, and my empty water glass. It's great. Everything's working there. Toggle back around. We have our mute button that we just added, and our hang up button that ends the call. So everything's working as expected. We've added 2 features, but one thing that's a little bit annoying with our UI, and it's really obvious when there's actually a call connected, but our buttons, functional as they may be, don't really do us a lot of good at all times. And in fact, they're obscuring the lovely face that you're trying to talk to right now. And that's not cool. I don't like that. I don't like that, anything's blocked like that. And what we want to do is write some code to animate them away. And what we're going to do that is we're going to write some timer code. And we're going to write some UI animation code to make those buttons fade in at the beginning and fade out. And the way we'll do that is first we want to set the buttons to be both hidden and to have an alpha of 0. We need both because hidden makes them not tappable. Alpha, it also makes them invisible, but there's no way to animate from visible to hidden. You can only animate alpha. So we need to also animate alpha from fully visible to completely invisible. And we do that with the alpha property. And what we're going to do is right at the end of viewDidLoad, which runs when our screen appears, we're going to set those properties on our different buttons. But I've noticed we have one problem. So I created a hang up button and mute button, but we didn't create a switch camera button outlet. So we'll do that real quick. Again, I'm just going to do this quick because we just did it a minute ago. Create an outlet, call it switch camera button. So that'll add that to code. So now we have access to that property. Cool. Excellent. We have access to that object now from code. So I can do the things that I need to do. The first thing we need to do, we'll just call this set button properties for animation. So we'll do self.hangupButton dot hidden equals true. Self dot, hey, thanks for the follow, Kidopium. Self.muteButton dot hidden is equal to true, and self.switchCameraButton dot hidden equals true. So now the buttons are hidden, but we also need to deal with the alpha properties. So that's going to be self.hangupButton. Thank you for the follow, Vanek Games. Alpha is equal to 0.0. Self.muteButton.alpha equals 0.0. This is basically just setting these buttons to invisible. And they're already hidden, so they can't be tapped. Thank you for the follow, Vladuts966. Again, follow if you would like to receive notifications when I go live. I should be coding tomorrow morning at 9 Eastern, and at various times during the week. I'll just pop in. I have a pretty good setup here, and we can just drop in anytime. So the buttons are hidden now, and their alpha is set to 0, which means they are both hidden and invisible. So what we need now are some functions to show and hide them. And to do this, we're going to use UI views animation setup. So we're going to create a function here called showButtons. And then we're likewise going to have a function called hideButtons. And we want to be able to trigger those at any time. What we're going to do in showButtons is we'll set, let's see, now that I have these up here, I can do this pretty easy. We'll just grab these. We're going to toggle the hidden. So we're going to, when we do showButtons, we're going to make them unhide. So now they're tappable again. But they're still invisible because the alpha is set to 0. So we'll do UI view dot animate with duration. That's a mouthful. The duration that we want, hey, thanks for the follow, AnoKit. What we're going to do now is we're going to set the, get bored after a few minutes. Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I love learning. I think the biggest thing about programming is just it's a constant amount of learning. And if you're the kind of person that's driven by learning new things, there's nothing better in this world to do than programming, I think. And I'm going to get rid of the rest of this. There's nothing in the world better to do, I think, than programming, because you get the option to constantly learn new things. So what we're going to do here is create what is called a block. So what this little funky syntax here says is that there's no parameters and it doesn't return anything. So basically this block is just run this code. And what's going to happen is whatever's inside of here is going to get animated. So I'm going to set the alphas to 1.0. And that means that they'll be fully visible. All right, so when we show the buttons, when we run this show buttons function, everything's gonna unhide. Thanks for the follow, Catherine Michelle. I think that's Michelle. Yeah. Everything's gonna unhide, and it's gonna animate from 0 alpha up to 1 alpha. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So what we do here now is when we call show buttons, everything will animate in. We also need to hide buttons. Thanks for the follow, Zahari D. That's a very clever Twitch name, by the way, if you're expecting to get it read out on air. President Billup, thank you for the follow. This is fantastic. So what we want to do now is we want to do the opposite. So we hide button, or when we show buttons, we want to toggle the hidden first. When we animate them out, we want them to animate out to transparent before we hide them. just so that they don't disappear automatically, if that makes any sense. If we were to toggle hidden first, they would just disappear, and we wouldn't get the animation that we're going for. So we want to do the UI view animation first this time. So we're going to do animate with duration. The duration that we want, again, 7/10 of a second. And then I'm just going to double click on these completion or these blocks to have it add code for me. And then this Boolean is going to be completed. We're not actually even going to use it. We'll add code in here. So this is our animation code. This is the code that runs when the thing starts to animate. And we're just going to set the alphas to 0. So we're going from visible to transparent. And then inside of here, what this is a completion block. So this says, after the animation happens, what code do we want to run? And the code that we want to run when the animation completes is we want to hide the buttons. So UI view animate with duration. The duration is 0.7. Run these animations, and then when you're done with the animation, set everything to hidden. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. So we have our show and hide buttons function, and just for kicks to see if those are working, the best thing we can probably do right now is to just introduce some temporary buttons into our application and make them call those functions. So we'll do a button that we'll drag out here that says show buttons, and then we'll drag a button out here that says hide buttons, and we're going to delete these. We won't keep them around, but we'll just drag them out here so that we can test the functions that we wrote real quick, and then we'll just create temporary actions for these guys down here. We'll do show. Oops, we just lost our place. We'll do that right here. I'll drag show buttons out here. We'll do an action that says show, and then from hide buttons, we'll drag this out, and we'll create an action that says hide. This is just like dirty testing, right? We just want to make sure that what we just wrote works. And what we'll do in here is we'll call self.showButtons, and in hide, we'll call self.hideButtons. And if all goes well, when we run our application, we'll just take a look, and we should be able to toggle, and they should fade out, fade in, based on the button press. So just waiting for that to load up on the iPhone. Here it is. And if I tap show buttons, notice that they animate in subtly. And if I tap hide buttons, they fade out subtly. That's exactly what we're going for, over 7/10 of a second. So it's a real subtle fade in, fade out. Ideally, though, what we would like to do is obviously not have show buttons and hide buttons like that in our UI. That looks terrible. So let's get rid of that. What we want to do is when the application launches, so when the application first launches, we fade the buttons in, they sit there for a couple seconds, and then they go away. And in fact, we don't want to do it when the application launches. We want to do it when a video call starts. So we're running a video chat application, a connection comes in, we start this video chat. We need to know that those buttons exist. So they won't be shown by default. They'll be hidden. When a call connects, they'll fade in so that we know that they're there. And then after a couple seconds, they'll fade away to indicate that they're still there, but we might have to do something to find them again. Thanks, Lal Condon, for the follow. So what we want to do then is write some code that uses timers. Now, there's a class in Swift called NSTimer, and it's okay to work with. It's not the worst API in the world, but it's also not the best API in the world. I found a really good CocoaPod. So one thing that we need to do is we need to add a line of code here to our CocoaPod file, because we want to grab, we want a few things. First of all, thanks for the follow, Musk. We want to specify that the use frameworks directory should be used, and that basically says if there's an Objective-C or Swift library, I want you to package that up as a framework for use in the Xcode project. That's very valuable depending on your project to be able to use things as modules. And this is what makes that work. And then we need to add another source. So we need to add what's actually the default source for CocoaPod specs, which is github.com/cocoapods/specs.git. And then we're going to load a pod that is called Swifty Timer. So Swifty Timer is going to allow us to work with NS Timer in a way that doesn't hurt too bad. Thank you for the follow, Dutch Bear. So we will take a look real quick. I'll go into Chrome to show you what Swifty Timer is. Swifty Timer basically gives us some new ways to work with NS Timer. So you can do things like nstimer.every 0.7 seconds. So if you wanted to run some code every second or every 5 seconds, this is a really good way to do it because it's going to run on the background thread every second. Or what we want to do is nstimer.after. And notice that it adds some things like 1.minute or 0.7 This was inspired by Ruby on Rails. This person really liked the way things looked like. So you could do 100 milliseconds, 1 second, 2.5 seconds, or you can do after, things like that. After 1.minute. In our case, we want to do something more along the lines of like 4 seconds or something like that. So what we wanted to do, now that we've added this pod, and real quick, in case you're not familiar with CocoaPods, CocoaPods is a dependency manager. So it allows us to add libraries very easily to our iOS and Mac applications. So what we're using is the Swifty Timer CocoaPod. So that's what this looks like inside of CocoaPods. Gives you a nice description, tells you when it was last built. For our purposes, it's just adding this pod Swifty Timer line into our pod file, and then heading to the terminal for our project and saying pod install. And that's going to go out and find the new dependency, install it and any other dependencies that it needs to make Swifty Timer work. This might take a second. Yeah, there it goes. So you'll notice here in green it says it installed Swifty Timer. So we have Swifty Timer now. The first thing you want to do after you install a new pod is to build. So you want to build the application so that it brings in all of the dependencies that we just went out and sought. And then we come back to our view controller, and we'll have access to Swifty Timer by saying import Swifty Timer. What's our bug now? We got a bug. Ignoring linker optimizations. Okay, we don't actually have a bug. We have a bunch of warnings, but we don't have any bugs. That's good. I was afraid we had introduced some poor code, but we're doing okay. So we have Swifty Timer now. What can we do with Swifty Timer? Well, we want to run some code when the conversation starts. And if we scroll down in our view controller, we have a function for that inside of the if we scroll down to, where is it? Hangouts is the only application, by the way, that I know of that ignores do not disturb. It kills me. Also, sorry, we're at a major intersection outside, so it's really loud. Every now and then we'll get some horns honking and some sirens and stuff like that. So what we want to do in this case is when a conversation connects. So we're going to do it on, let's see, we'll do on invite received. So if we look at did receive invite, this is where we accept the call. So we've received an invite from someone else that wants to video chat with us. And we are at this point we are accepting their video call, and we're saying accept with local media. So that's our video and audio locally, and we're connecting, and then we have a block in here that runs when that connection starts. So it's setting the conversation object and the delegate equal to self. This is a perfect place for our for us to run our timer code that shows the buttons. So the first thing we want to do is, okay, we've connected the call, we've started the call. Let's show the buttons on call start, and then let's start a timer. So we want to hide them. We want to hide those buttons. So we'll do nstimer dot after. And we'll do 4 seconds. So after 4 seconds, run some code. And that code will be self.hide buttons. Cool. If I run that code now, this at this point should get rid of those show and hide buttons that we created earlier because we deleted them. And it should also give us some new controls, some new functionality for it'll temporarily show the buttons when a connection happens, and then it'll hide them. We'll have to address one issue, which is that the buttons will now be hidden. But we'll deal with that in a second. Let's first make sure that what we just added works. So let's make a call to, what is this? Callus Penny Hanover. Callus Penny Hanover. We'll send the invite. Let's first get our camera set up, make sure it's working. That's me. Send an invite. We get connected up. There's the buttons. And wait for it. There they go. Okay, so that's working. Everything there is working. I now no longer have any buttons though. That's no good. So let's stop the application and fix that issue. We need to add some code to toggle those buttons temporarily. We'll do it when the user taps the screen, when they tap the remote video. So that's the video of the person that you're talking to. When that gets tapped on, we'll show those buttons, and then we'll fade them out again after a slightly longer time. So what we want to do is we want to go back up to view did load. So this is the function that runs when the application launches, or when the view launches, and we're going to do a few things. We're going to create. Let's put this in a function. We'll do setup video tap recognizer. So we're gonna create a function called setup video tap recognizer down here. Setup video tap recognizer, and that doesn't take any parameters. It doesn't return anything. And what we're gonna do in here is we are going to create a tap recognizer. So this is UI tap gesture recognizer, and we're going to use this target action. Target is going to be the class where there's an action that we want to run. That's going to be this one, self, our class. And in here, we're going to call a selector named remote media view tapped. Just like that. And then we need that function, so we need to know what that function is going to do. So let's do that first. Remote media view tapped, just to knock this out so that we know what it's going to do. We know that it's going to show the buttons, and it's going to do a timer after 6 seconds, run some code, and that code that it's going to run is hide buttons. So why 6 seconds when we did 4 before? Well, we figure if you tap the screen, you're probably going to want to interact with the buttons. So I don't want to hide them too fast. So we'll give you a couple more seconds in the case that you're trying to interact with the buttons. So we'll do 6 seconds instead of 4. And then we need to come back up here and add that tap recognizer. So we add a gesture recognizer, and that gesture recognizer that we want to add to the remote media view is that tap one that we just created. And then we do self.remoteMediaView.user interaction enabled equals true, which allows the user to tap on that video. And with these two things combined, we should have the ability to tap the video to show the buttons, and the button should hide. And if all goes well, when we run this, we'll have that exact functionality. And let's refresh this browser. pull the camera back up one more time while we wait. And we'll head over to QuickTime as the iPhone launches. And we'll send a connection request to Brash Roddy Jamestown. Send that invite over. When the call connects, there's our buttons, and then they disappear after 4 seconds. And now the feature that we just added just a moment ago is that if I tap the screen, they show up for 6 seconds, and then they'll disappear. So when this fades out again, now when I tap, I can do things like switch camera. So now you're looking at my rear camera, and then they fade out. I can tap, switch it back, and I can end the call. So that's that. Now there's only one last thing that we're going to add before we call it quits. What do we do? So you'll notice we still have the buttons showing up and all that. What if we wanted them to automatically go away when the conversation ends? Like if they're showing on screen and the conversation ends, we want the buttons to hide, fade out. So we would do that real quickly, pretty easy one. We go over to Xcode and we look for something called conversation ended. So this is what happens when the conversation ends. Right now, the only thing that happens is the title of the window gets set to no call connected. We can just simply here call self.hide buttons and they go away. Now, if you wanted it to also work such that if you tap on the screen but there's no video connected, that would be pretty easy to add. We could go back up and do an if check on the tap to see if there's a call connected before we showed the buttons. But for now, this works. This works quite well. And just to show you where we came from originally, if we go to let's see, twilio.com/docs/API/video. This is where, by the way, you would go if you wanted to get started on this yourself. So you go to http twilio.com/trytwilio first to create an account with Twilio, and then you would go to twilio.com/docs/API/video to get the quick start that we started from. And if I go there and say get started on iOS, and I scroll down to our application that we started with, I say download for Swift. I just want to show you those that tuned in late, where did we start? Like, what did we start with? If I come in here, go back, go to the terminal, and I change into this directory, and I say pod install to get the dependencies using CocoaPods. Oh yeah, I just linked those into the chat. So the TryTwilio is the where you go to create a Twilio account. The Docs API video is where you would go to get to the quick start. And then if you want to do everything that I've shown in this stream, this is the blog post explaining everything that we did here. That's this blog post right here. So that'll give you another way to go check everything out. But this is what we would start with, actually, and what we had at the beginning of this endeavor. We had a UI that looked a lot different. If we come to the source file for viewcontroller.swift, and I change this token URL to https brent.ngrok.io, and I'm going to run this one. I'm going to run this one locally on a 6+ simulator. Oh, the website, Eddie linked them. Okay. Sorry. My bad. So this is the 6+ simulator. Hey, thanks, more Epic Gaming for you. This is the version of the application that we started with. I'll change the scale here to 33. This is what we started with Now let's go back to 50. This is what we started with at the beginning, and then this is what we ended up with in the end. So if let's see, should be able to, let's see what happened here. Go away. Not quite sure why. Let's see. We'll do a call to Callus, Zelda, Hanover. Oh, now it finally ran over there. Okay. If I call that, let's see if we can connect these two together. No. So what happened here? I think what happened here is, what did I do? Why did we have nil? Oh, okay. Let's just rerun this. I think I know what happened. I think it had to do with the way that button wasn't wired up. Zesty, Wendy, Oakland. We'll send an invite. Let's see if this works. It might not because of the simulator. I'm not getting any indication that it's not working. Anyways, you can see the differences here. If you've been watching, you can see the changes that we had. Obviously, we don't have this text-based hang up button anymore. We have these nice icons that we got created. We have 2 more features than this one had. We moved this username up to the top for usability perspective. We stopped using red in our UI because that can mean some not great things. Depending on culturally where your application is running, you want to kind of avoid red. It's kind of harsh anyways, especially that red. It is the Twilio color, I guess, but you want to kind of try to avoid those kinds of colors in your UIs. So that is our video chat application. Again, we started from a quick start. We used a blog post. You can find all kinds of really fun things to try on twilio.com/blog. Just recently, I shipped a post. Sam just shipped a post on WebRTC stats, which is awesome. And then I just shipped this post on designing iOS video chat applications, which will show you how to build exactly what we just did in this stream. And one other thing that I wanted to point your attention to is if you take a look at the blog post that I linked in chat, and you scroll down, let's zoom out a bit, and you come over here to posts by product, you can see, or posts by stack, and you click on Swift. If you're interested in doing more with Swift, you can click here and you can find all of the blog posts on Twilio's blog that have been built using Swift. I did a couple of chat application blog posts, so that's text-based chat. Matt Mackay just did a browser video calls with Python and Swift that shows you how to get started with the quick start and building your own token server in Python. And then this post right here is the one that covers everything that we talked about in here today. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you for everyone that followed. If you're tuned in right now and you haven't followed, please consider tossing a follow so that you can know when I go live again. I will be streaming again tomorrow morning at 9 Eastern. That is my weekly set time, but I drop in and stream just about any time I can find time to do it because I just really love showing people how awesome programming can be. More Epic Gaming for You says, I want to code in OS 10 in Windows VMware. Do you think that's okay? So there's 2 parts to your question, and I'll address them both. Will it work is question number 1. Probably. You can find guides everywhere. Do I think it's okay? It's not for me to judge. Apple's end user license agreement would say it's not allowed. You have to run OS 10 on Mac hardware. That's not to say that it won't work. So you really have to make the judgment call there. Totally, like, decide for yourself whether you're morally okay with breaking an end user license agreement. If you're okay with it, it'll definitely work. There are plenty of guides out there that will show you how to do it. You can also get OS 10 to work on. You can totally get it to work directly on the hardware if that's the way you wanted to do it. But again, it's a moral slash legal place that you enter into, because Apple doesn't want you doing that. So that's up to you. Does anybody else have any other questions while we're here? Oh, thanks for the follow, Valence Noxon. Does anybody else have any other questions while we're here? We can totally do Q&A. If there's something you want to see in a future stream, I think last stream we did some stuff with what did we do? We did some stuff with MapKit. So I built an application where I gathered all of the locations, like city, state, country, that everyone lived in. We built a really quick table view application, and we plotted them on maps. That was fun. That was totally cool. We can do stuff like that in the future. We can play around with all the different APIs that are out there. Yeah, I mean, don't want to break any laws. Technically, you would be breaking an end user license agreement, which means you're violating the terms of using the application. Whether you're breaking a law or not, I'm not 100% savvy to that law. They technically could say something about that. Thanks for the follow, Wigo. Do I only develop with iOS and OS 10? No. Actually, I do a lot of different types of development. I am a Microsoft MVP. I come from the world of desktop applications written in XAML and C#. I've done some web programming in ASP.NET. I do Ruby stuff in the back end. I've done some JavaScript stuff. What else? I wrote a blog post using PHP. That was the most frightening thing I think I've done in a while. No, I really enjoy doing this. So getting to play with new languages and new frameworks. In the JavaScript land, I love Ember.js. I think that's been like one of my favorite things in the JavaScript world. No, I just really enjoy this stuff, and I get a kick out of showing people how things work. So that's what we do. I've toyed with Android a little bit. I've done some Windows Mobile. I've also done some Xamarin stuff in the mobile space. So C# development that works in iOS and Android. How could you code Swift without doing the VMware thing? So you can't do iOS or OS 10 without a Mac currently, but you can do Swift. So Swift is now open source, so you could run Swift on Linux. If you just wanted to learn that language, that would be one way to do it. You could get Linux working in VMware and install, I think it's from Swift, let's see. Let's do this over here. I think that's swift.org. Yeah, so swift.org is the open source site for the Swift language. And you could, from here, you could get the Swift compiler. There's a getting started. Actually, Twilio getting started with Swift. So we have a blog post getting started with Swift on Linux. So if you, I'll do it over here so that you can have a link, /blog Swift Linux. So there's a blog post that one of our colleagues wrote called Getting Started with Swift on Linux. Ricky Robinette wrote this blog post. He's excellent. This will show you how to get the compiler working. This will get you started with running Swift on Linux. So if you just want to learn the language and not necessarily all the UI stuff right away, that would be the best way to do Swift. If you want to live in the land of being an Apple developer, I would recommend also dabbling with Objective-C. There's a free course on Code School. This is just so that if you run into some old code that was written in Objective-C, you're going to want to know how it works and be able to translate it to Swift. So there's a free course on Code School called Try Objective-C that'll show you how the language works. that would be worth learning. If you want to do games, there's Sprite Kit, and Scene Kit for games. Hold on one second. Sure, ending stream soon. Yeah, so Sprite Kit and Scene Kit for building 2D and 3D games. That's excellent for that. But yeah, for being an Apple developer, you can get by with just knowing Swift. I would say that's a good place to start. Learning Swift is going to open up a lot of doors. It's going to be basically your language of choice for your iOS and OS 10 apps, but it's also eventually going to be possible to use on the server. So now that it's open source and working on Linux, it's going to be pretty soon. There's actually a couple of web frameworks already out there for Swift that are definitely going to help. I notice I lost a light. That sucks. That's why we're getting some shadows in the green screen now. But yeah, the batteries ran out. That's how long we've been streaming. So yeah, I would say learn Swift. That's going to be good for your front end, and it's going to be eventually good for your back end programming as well. Any more questions? If not, again, I'll be here. It would be best to buy a Mac. You know what? You get away with getting an old Mac Mini. As long as it's an Intel Mac Mini, it should work. You can find some pretty cheap ones out there. Go back like 2 or 3 years and buy something on eBay. I don't mean go back in time 2 or 3 years. Buy a Mac Mini from 2 or 3 years ago. That should be enough. Yeah. So let's see if I can. No, I don't want to go that way. I want to go this way because of the way the light is angled right now. Anyways, I think what we're going to do is probably call it for today. If you have any more questions that you want to ask me in the meantime while I'm not here, you can find me on Twitter. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I am at Brent Schooley. I will answer any questions that you have after this there. Otherwise, I will see you next time. If you haven't followed, toss a follow so you know when it's going to start again. I'll stick around for a little bit more Epic Gaming if you have some more questions. No worries. I'll stay in the chat. I'm just going to turn the video off. Yeah, so thank you everyone for tuning in, and I will be back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern, as well as various other times. Sometimes I'm playing games, sometimes I'm coding. So if you see me in here playing Rocket League, that's because I'm not working on stuff. I just want to have some fun. We can hang out. You can ask me questions during that too. It's fine. But again, I'll see you next time.